I would like for you to go through your stories that are done, and the character, the protagonist whose story it is, I want you to look at what life lesson they're struggling with so that you can start to look at some resonances. And I would wager that the character is struggling with emotional chords that are very similar to your own. And if you can identify one of those 4 major emotional chords we've established, then the script, when you do the outline, can really focus on watching a character evolve through each life lesson. It will connect each of the stories in a way that feels organic, right? So that when we get through the outline and we say there's a point of no return for this character to master this lesson, we've connected each scene based on this same emotional chord. So that it kind of has this is where we began, and this is how we grew into the person that I am, by healing this lesson. Because each of the characters that are entering in to the story that's being told, each of these characters are here to tell the protagonist's larger story, right? We are on the hero's journey to see the protagonist come out on the end having learned and mastered this life lesson. If you know what that is as the writer from the very beginning, when you structure the outline, then there's a continuity on this journey that we stay with. Like if you look at The Alchemist, right? We stay on this journey with him because very early on, we establish that it is his personal legend that he is in search of, right? So even as he meets different characters, right, along the way, the man he works for, the bandits, all these different people enter into the story and they have their own little stories. Their stories are telling the larger story of the protagonist and his search for his personal legend. So by establishing that, the writer knows at the very beginning that this personal legend, the specifics of what he needs to learn about his personal legend is what's driving the script. So I want you to look through all the stories you have, as well as the stories you know that need to be told. What is that recurring emotional chord? It's probably 1 or 2, but they're intricately related, and the story cannot end until the character learns this lesson and masters it. And each scene, there is a component. There's something that the character needs to learn in each scene that will get them closer to mastering this life lesson, so that you're breaking it down into smaller lessons, each interaction with someone. In Barbara's story, the kid at the railroad track, right? The birthday party in the restaurant, the story with Yolanda, the older sister that protects her. Each story, little Barbara is learning a lesson that she carries through in her life that gets her to the final lesson. But it's all a part of a larger lesson that once she finally learns it, she moves into the next stage of her life. Right? And the entire story changes. It becomes a different novel. So I want us to track what the overarching emotional chord is by going into each scene and looking at what is the character, what is the protagonist struggling with, and what are all of the other characters around them forcing them to face, because they are. And if there is not a lesson learned in each scene, then you're writing exposition, not action. Is that clear? Does that make sense?
I was trying to ask it, but I was muted.
So, exposition is explaining. Exposition is backstory. Exposition is anything that is not happening in the present. Okay. The present is what's happening between 2 characters in a scene right now. Okay. You're in a scene the two of them are trying to get something from each other. For example, there's a couple of rules that I look at to avoid exposition. If you are in a scene talking about somebody who's not in the scene, 9 times out of 10, it's exposition.
I do that a lot.
Stay in the present. It's rich enough. If you feel like you need to reference somebody who's not in the scene, then that means that that's a story that needs to be written. Mm. Don't tell me what somebody is feeling. Don't tell me what they're struggling with. Show me. Create a problem within the scene that they have to solve so that I will understand, because I'm learning the lesson and trying to solve the problem at the same time that they are as the reader. Right? The reader and the protagonist are learning simultaneously. That's always action. So the key to action is there needs to be a conflict. There needs to be a problem that needs to be solved by the end of this scene. And by the end of the scene is just like in acting. If you have an activity, you have a problem you need to solve, it has a set time limit. And that's what raises the stakes, right? If you're writing for television and film, scenes generally can't be more than, a minute and a half, 2 minutes. That's how long you have to create a problem and get some resolution. That's the structure, right? In novels, it's chapters. By the end of the chapter, they need to have solved one problem that creates another problem that we address in the next chapter, so that you're constantly raising the stakes. Does that make sense? Question?